Good morning. Good morning. We are ready to start. And Cynthia, if you want to close the door, but let anybody in that comes to the door, that would be good. And help us keep the noise down too. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today to this joint class of the Earth Keepers group and the Contemporary Issues Adult Sunday School class. I am Steve. I'm the leader of the Contemporary Issues class, and I'm going to introduce Kathy in a minute as the Earth Keepers group leader, and want to thank Kathy for suggesting this topic today and getting our classes together. A couple announcements before we start. We are having Zoomers meet us on the internet, and we want to make sure they can hear us okay. Susan, we're still okay? Good. And Zoomers, please mute yourself on the lower left corner of your screen when you're not talking so we can keep the background noise down. And folks here, please silence your cell phones if they're not already in worship mode, as we like to say. And we are recording this for future playback. For those folks who can't be here this morning, they can watch it on the internet later at their leisure. Other announcements, I want to announce for Betty about the Active Minds class. It's going to be on Tuesday. What time, Betty? 2 p.m. about Iran. So a timely topic for that too. And a church community supper today at 4:30. When the Chiefs play also today, the Chiefs and the Bills. So there's always multiple things going on to choose from. Okay, with that, I want to introduce Paige, our speaker, Paige McFarland from Centennial, and welcome Carrie also from the Centennial Water District. And I want to tell just a couple things about Paige's background, her bio from her LinkedIn webpage about this before I turn over to Kathy. And Paige McFarland is the Water Efficiency Coordinator with the Centennial Water Department. She's also been a horticulturist with the city of Golden and worked with the Denver Zoological Foundation. Her education is from the University of Massachusetts, and she has a bachelor's degree in sustainable food and farming, quite a background page, from Mount Holyoke College. So today she is going to present a slideshow, a PowerPoint slideshow, and we'll take questions during it. It'll be primarily about water conservation, but she's also promised to answer our questions about water in general. If you want to know where the sources are, what the future is, we'll get Paige's input on that too. And so feel free to raise your hand and ask questions during the presentation while it occurs to you, and she'll be glad to take those comments and questions. Okay, with that, Kathy Kilmer.
Hey folks, quick survey question. How many of you believe that Lori really does love Rev Mark? I think it should be unanimous. Yeah, he's a good guy. Speaking of survey questions, surveys that various groups have done with the American public have found that 70 to 77% of Americans are concerned or very concerned about the climate crisis. And yet so many of us don't talk about it. I wonder, you don't have to show your hands, but I just wonder if any of you this week talked about the climate crisis with anybody, your loved one, friend. All right, that's a pretty good response. Most of us don't do it. I think because maybe we're scared about the response, or we don't feel like we're knowledgeable enough, or we're just too busy. But it's so important that we talk about it. It really matters. It matters that we talk about solutions or to embrace them. It matters that we talk to our legislators and make sure that they are passing policies that are going to make a difference for us. And in fact, the Earth Keepers Advocacy Committee is going to begin showing up in the atrium on Sunday mornings with an opportunity for you to take action with your legislators, maybe write a postcard, sign a petition, write a letter. And so please watch for us in the atrium for that. It's very important. So now let's get to the main attraction, and that is these two wonderful women from Centennial Water. One of them is Carrie Larice, and she's the community relations manager. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions you might have afterwards. And the other is Paige McFarland, who Steve has already introduced. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. I have just a few slides or not a few slides, I got quite a few for you. But yeah, thank you for having me. As mentioned, I am the water efficiency coordinator for Centennial Water. I've been with Centennial for just over a year now. Prior to that, I was a horticulturist, so I designed and maintained gardens, particularly low water and climate adaptive gardens. So I did that for close to a decade, but I'm happy to be transitioning into water now. So important. Would you mind putting it in presentation mode, or does the Zoom need to be on?
Slideshow. Thank you, people. Appreciate that. Uh-oh.
From the beginning.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you. So I just wanted to touch on a few things before I get started. I'm going to talk a lot about water supply today. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the water supply that is specific to Highlands Ranch and Solstice. So the Centennial Water Service Area. So every water provider in the metro area has its own water supply. They have their own needs and means and methods of meeting the needs of their communities. So something that is true for Centennial Water is not necessarily going to be true for Denver Water or Aurora Water or any of these other water providers. So I just want to keep that in mind. I'm talking specifically to our supply. Also, I know there's been some concerns raised in the community about the potential for water to be brought in from the San Luis Valley to Douglas County. I'm not going to touch on that today, just because it actually doesn't affect us at all. It doesn't affect the water supply of Highlands Ranch. We are not associated with that project at all. That's a Parker Water and Sanitation District project. So if you'd like to know more about that, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to those folks. And then my third is a question for you. Does anybody know how much an acre foot of water is? Yeah?
I just looked it up because I used to work in water resources a long time ago. It was like 325,851 gallons.
That is exactly what it is. Awesome. So if you're a visual person like I am, the visual for that is to imagine a football field 1 foot deep and then fill that with water. So in water resources, we talk in terms of acre feet as opposed to gallons. We're talking about lots of water. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So a quick history of Centennial Water for you. Highlands Ranch was established in 1979. So Mission Viejo came in, they purchased the parcel and they started building. And then the Mission Viejo Water and Sanitation District was established in 1980 and we switched over to Centennial Water in 1984. We were Centennial Water before the city of Centennial existed, if you've ever wondered about that. So our community is expected to reach build out by 2025, just in a year or two now. So we're a little bit unique compared to the rest of the communities in the Denver metro area, and that we are not anticipating that our community is going to see this expansive growth like they're going to see in Denver, Aurora, Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, that sort of thing. So that does give us a little bit of an edge, is we know what our population is going to be and how much we need to supply for that. We're a Title 32 special district, so is the Highlands Ranch Metro District. We're both special districts, separate governments. We each have our own board of directors. Centennial is governed by a 5-member board of directors. And as of this year, we, for the first time in 40 years, have a completely citizen elected board. So for the past 40 years, we had a developer board and there was no elections, anything like that. So we had our first election in 2022 and we put 2 citizen elected board members on our board. And now we have a fully elected board. So it's really exciting for us. Next slide, please. We have a water supply portfolio valued at 235 million, and we deliver 4.5 billion gallons of water annually. So that's to Highlands Ranch Metro District, that's to the Mirabel Metro District, which is the Solstice community out by Chatfield. And then we also service Northern Douglas County, so we don't provide water to that, we have an agreement with Northern Douglas County where they buy water from us and then they distribute it to their community themselves. We have a sanitary sewer system and we collect and treat 2.3 billion gallons of wastewater. So we have both a water treatment plant and a wastewater plant. That means we're a full service water provider. Not every water provider in the metro area is. Denver Water is not, Aurora is not, Westminster's not. Most of these places in the metro area have an arrangement with Metro Water Recovery, and that's where they send their wastewater to be treated, but we treat our own. And then we have 2 wheeling agreements. So this means we wheel water to Castle Pines North Metro District and Roxborough Water. So it is their water, but they use our distribution system to give it out to their community. So we make some funds there. Next slide, please. You might have seen this image before. This is just a quick snapshot of how water is used in Colorado. I think I stole it from the Colorado Water Plan. And 80% of the water in Colorado falls west of the divide. 90% of us live east of the divide. So historically, there's been a little bit of tension there, but we're working on it. Most importantly, I want you to look at this water sector by use. So 90% of the water in Colorado is used in agriculture, 7% for municipalities, which is us here in the metro area, and 3% large industry. So we are being tasked by the state to please reduce this 7% that we use along the Front Range with our population generally overall going to increase. They're already estimating that 1/3 of irrigated farmland in Colorado is going to be dried up to meet municipal demand by 2050. So we want to lessen our impact on our agriculture community as much as we can. We're already anticipating a large impact there. Our agricultural industry does contribute close to $50 billion to our state's economy every year. So we definitely want to be sensitive to that. Next slide, please. Oh, yes.
Are there efforts to get agriculture to reduce their usage?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of federal and state support funding out there for agricultural improved technology, particularly. And there's a lot of collaboration happening between municipalities and agriculture too. But yes, absolutely. Everyone is being asked to reduce their water use. This is a little crash course in Colorado water law. Is anybody familiar with how this works? Yes, yes. So prior appropriation in response to scarcity, that's the water system that we use. This is opposed to riparian appropriation. So I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up in a rural area and everybody has individual wells on their property, and those wells can be replenished by rainfall relatively quickly. And what riparian law, and the difference here is if you own property, then you have the right to use any of the water that's on or below the property there. Where here in Colorado, it's whoever got to it first. Just because you have a stream or a river that runs by your home doesn't mean you get to use that water. The use for the water also has to be reasonable and beneficial. So outdoor irrigation does fall under reasonable and beneficial, but the reasonable part is important. So in terms of a drought, outdoor irrigation might no longer be considered reasonable. And again, yeah, I touched on this already, but the irrigated farmland could be dried up to meet municipal need. I'm also going to touch on groundwater rights later in the presentation. And in groundwater and surface water rights are entirely different. They're different court systems. Next slide, please. A little bit more continuing about our water use. So we are a headwaters state, which means all of our rivers start here and they flow out of state, except for this very tiny river right here that curls back in, but everything else flows out of our state. We have 7 major rivers, 8 river basins. We also technically have a 9th basin called the Metro Basin, but that's still the South Platte Basin. That's what we're in. And the purpose of that extra basin is just because there's a lot of agricultural folks in the South Platte Basin, and then there's a lot of metro folks in the South Platte Basin, and we obviously have some different challenges and concerns. So that's why we kind of created that 9th basin. We have a lot of 9 compacts that require us to deliver water beyond our borders. We serve 19 states and Mexico, and over 60% of that water leaves our state. We never see. Next slide, please. So all of this collaboration and the way we use water and conservation is extremely important because we have a variable climate, as we all know. This is a snapshot of US Drought Monitor from our 2002 drought. Very difficult year for water. You can guess from the bright red that it wasn't great. We had very reduced snowpack. We had our largest fire until 2020. In 2020, we had 3 of our largest fires in our state's history. And then Denver imposed mandatory water restrictions. So it's not actually super common for a water provider to impose mandatory restrictions. A lot of times it is voluntary. But if you put mandatory restrictions in place, you know it's serious. You guys probably know that last July of 2022, we had to go into stage 1 drought restrictions. Next slide, please. This is one that's more recent. So this is Denver County, this weird squiggly one, and Douglas County right here. So you can see we're sitting pretty right now, but there are still areas of our state that are in drought. They're most of them, these areas are perpetually in drought, particularly on the New Mexico border. And these patterns are going to continue. Not just our hot, dry years being hotter and drier and lasting longer, our wet years are also going to be wetter. You can see up here, we had some years with historic precipitation the same time we were having droughts. We all know how devastating floods can be to our communities. The average yearly temperature is increasing. We've reduced by 20% stream flow over the past century. So it's pretty undeniable that our climate is changing. Next slide, please. All right, so this is specifically Centennial, our water supply. 51% we lease, 49% we own. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the 4 reservoirs that Centennial water supply comes from. This is the South Platte Reservoir. This is our biggest asset in terms of our water supply because this is actually the only reservoir that we fully own. And
Oops, sorry.
no, I was almost done there. But actually all these pictures, by the way, are from this past spring. So all of our reservoirs were completely full thanks to our rainfall. This is McClellan. So McClellan is off of West County line, and then South Platte.
That's near Platte Canyon Road.
Platte Canyon Road. Okay.
Where was the other one? Is that the South Platte Reservoir?
Yeah, the South Platte that's the one, Platte Canyon Road.
Yeah, right up 470, right up the edge of Gravel. Just before you get to 470, just west of the river. Santa Fe, it's west of Santa Fe. West of Santa Fe on the north side of the river. It's visible. You guys.
They're all close by. You can go take a look at all of them within reasonable distance. This is McClellan. This is just right across where I live on West County line. It's not too far from like the Windcrest community, if you know where that is. So this reservoir is owned by the city of Englewood. We have an extremely important relationship with the city of Englewood. That 51% of the water we lease, a huge chunk of that 51% is with the city of Englewood. I'll talk about that in just a couple slides. But you can see here we lease 65% of that reservoir. The James Tingle Reservoir. So this doesn't get talked about super often because you can't drive to it easily from Highlands Ranch, but this is up in Park County. We part own this with the Center of Colorado Water and Sanitation District. A little over half of it we own. So we helped contribute a portion of funds to this whole project in 2008 cost about $10 million. And $3 million of that, give or take, went into helping construct this reservoir. The other $7 million was just to buy and reappropriate the water rights and get these water rights off of Michigan Creek, which is the river that we divert water from to fill this reservoir. And then what happens is this reservoir will divert water down into the South Platte. That's how it gets to us. And then we'll take that water off the South Platte, and it's from this area and from those rights. Next slide, please. Chatfield Reservoir. So I think everybody's probably familiar with this. It's a great place for recreation, lots of bird watching and that sort of thing there. I do want to spend just a minute on it because the Chatfield reallocation project that took place is a huge achievement for our state as well as Centennial Water. It took over 25 years to complete. The building itself only took 4 or 5 years, but all of the collaboration and all the parties that needed to come to the table to make this happen took a very long time. So if you don't know, Chatfield is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, so it's federally owned. So there had to be collaboration between federal government, state government, about 10 water providers in the metro area that are able to store water in here, as well as some nonprofit organizations to try to mitigate the ecological impact of this project. And what we did is raise the water level in Chatfield by 12 feet, not 12,000, 12 feet, which allowed us to create some little over 20,000 acre feet of storage space for water providers. And the reason we needed to do that is because the original purpose of Chatfield was flood mitigation for Denver, so we can't lose its, original purpose. It's extremely important. But we were all allowed to start storing water here in 2020, and this past year was the first time we were ever really able to use it. We filled it completely. Of that over 20,000 acre feet, we own close to 7,000, and that's a third of the total available storage in that reservoir for water providers. We own the largest piece of the pie.
Is the South Platte River the only source of water for that reservoir?
I believe so. I don't think Plum Creek
Creek.
does.
Plum Creek, also Creek.
I think just the South Platte,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what-
And I just want to say one more thing about Chatfield. To date, we have invested close to $60 million in that project. We originally took out a $50 million loan through the Colorado Water Conservation Board, but it was worth every single penny. It close to doubled our storage, our available storage supply. And yeah, it was a fantastic project for us. Go ahead.
3 of those 4 reservoirs are downstream, lower elevation than most of the houses in Highland Ranch. Are you pumping water?
Yeah, we do. We try to, we do try to put like tanks and stuff like that above so we can use as much gravity. Most of our system does use gravity, but we also have these things called pump stations for the wastewater. And that literally raises the water that collects into those pump stations up. So then we can use the gravity to bring it down into our plants.
Am I correct in assuming that you're not pulling any groundwater for your sources?
No, you are incorrect. We do pull groundwater. I'm going to talk about it in just a second.
I thought you might be.
Yeah, we'll get there. The good stuff first. So the city of Englewood, gonna circle back to this. We have 2 water supply contracts with the city of Englewood. Both of those contracts have partially leasing of storage and also leasing of water. These are about 20-year contracts with the option to renew for another 20 years. So it's pretty secure, but it's an extremely important relationship for us. City of Englewood is unique in that they are water rich. They have very senior water rights because when they were building up their community, they originally intended that they were going to expand much larger. But Denver, places like Highlands Ranch, we kind of all built up around them and they can only build upward now. So they have all this water, all these senior water rights. So they're very kind to work with us and sell it to us. So they sell us any of their extra water they have that they deem they're not going to meet need for their community that year. It's up to them what they decide to sell us. But on average, they sell us a little over 6,000 acre feet per year. And that does provide 40% of our water supply. Go ahead.
I'm interested to know, is there
a benefit to leasing as opposed to owning water rights? I'm trying to,
Yeah.
I understand the context.
Yeah.
But could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a benefit. There's maybe a benefit in that it saves us water. Water is extremely expensive and there aren't a lot of senior water rights available on the market. The reason a lot of us, water providers in the South Metro area do have to use groundwater is because we built up after Denver and a lot of these other places in the Metro District and north and down here in the South. By the time we came about, most of the senior water rights were gone. And most people are not going to give up their senior water rights. So. We are also part of the WISE project, so Water Infrastructure and Supply Efficiency Project. This is a project mainly to the benefit of this, again, the South Metro area. We're involved in it. Castle Rock is a part of it. Sterling Ranch, we're all part of it. I think Parker too, we're all part of this. But the gist of it is that Denver and Aurora, so water gets used, it gets treated at South Metro, and then a lot of times as a water provider, you have certain rights that allow you to reuse your effluent. That's wastewater that's been treated back to a drinkable level. And so when Denver and Aurora decide that they have extra effluent water, they agree to sell that to those of us in the South Metro area. So our share is supposed to be 1,000 acre feet per year. We're not necessarily getting 1,000 acre feet per year just yet. There's a bunch of stipulations in the contract of how much needs to be provided over X amount of years. But eventually we'll be getting, 1,000 acre feet per year. And yes, Aurora and Denver decide when and if this water is available. Go ahead.
So you had mentioned earlier that we are unique in that we are a full service where we have both water treatment and wastewater treatment.
Mhm.
In that sense, is Centennial also reclaiming water and creating effluent that we then use, or is that something in the future?
No, we do that right now. Actually, of the water that we own, we call it our augmentation plan, but that is the reusable effluent, and that accounts for 51% of the water we own. So we reuse a lot of it, and we do have, we have to have a special right to do that. But yeah. Okay, so the finances for providing all of this to you. So we have our 2 water plants and currently both of them are under construction. We did have to raise our rates a little bit this year, and that is we now have an infrastructure improvement fee that if you haven't already, you'll start to see on your bill each month. And that is all to go into funding our water and wastewater treatment plants. Normally a community gets a lot of money from tap fees. So new development, each time a home is built, it needs a tap. So each single family home has its own tap. And then if we're talking about like an HOA community space or like the parks and parkways, large spaces, outdoor irrigation, a lot of times they'll have multiple taps. So for many years, a lot of our funding came from tap fees, but as we're approaching build out, the money from that is not going to be much more. So that's part of the reason we needed to implement this new infrastructure improvement fee. The other thing that your water rights fund is our water acquisition fund. So if rights were to become available, like I said, people don't give up senior water rights often, but maybe if Englewood, we have a lease with them, maybe they decided they wanted to sell their water rights, we could potentially purchase those. So that's part of what your water rights fund or rates fund. That price per acre foot, the 30,000 to 50,000 per acre foot, it doesn't include the cost to build storage. So it takes millions of dollars to build a reservoir. 1 acre foot of water is enough for 2 single family homes a year. So it's very expensive. Next slide, please. You might have seen this before. This might have been in your mail, or if you took out a look at our website, this is the estimated total that a single family home will pay per year with our rate increases. So we're at $1,289. Just looking at some of our fellow water providers in the Douglas County area, you'll still see that our prices are down there. We're still pretty reasonable, I think. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're gonna start to talk about groundwater. So what does all this mean? It means that conservation is extremely important. Just because all of our reservoirs were full this year, that doesn't mean we have the water. That doesn't mean we can just use a bunch of it. We need to be conserving all the time. We always want to make sure our reservoirs are as full as possible. So another reason that conservation is so important is we want to reduce our reliance on groundwater as much as possible. Groundwater is considered non-renewable. Surface water that comes down from the mountains and the rivers, all that, that's considered renewable. So historically, we have supplied our community demand with 15% groundwater, 85% surface water. That's pretty good for the South Metro area. We have more surface water than any other South Metro water provider. Next slide, please. Groundwater, if you're not familiar, this is an aquifer system underground. So they're non-tributary, which means no streams or rivers flow into them. So non-renewable. This image is showing kind of how the aquifers look underground. So here are the counties. They stretch all the way from El Paso County up to Weld and Boulder. Over there, we have rights to drill into 3 of them. So this first yellow one up here is the Dawson Aquifer. Nobody uses that, it's non-usable. But we have rights to the Denver Aquifer. Next is the Arapahoe Aquifer. And then at the bottom there, we have the Laramie Fills Aquifer. These all lay on top of each other like a cake.
I teach our children about this, and their question to me every year, when we talk about our groundwater, is how deep is it? And I don't know. How deep is it? Do you know?
And unfortunately, I don't know that, but
It's crazy.
yeah, Carrie's gonna write it down and then we'll just have a chat with our water resources manager and we can, I don't know if you have an email list, but we can follow up with you guys.
Generally, how empty are they?
So that's the next thing I'm gonna talk about. No, stay on this slide, stay on this slide. Okay, so the state legislator, we had the 1960 Groundwater Act. And the legislature at the time was like, look, we don't know how we're gonna deal with the water demand increasing in the metro area, but we're gonna allow you guys to drill into the groundwater and use that to extinction. That's gonna be the next generation's problem. It's not gonna be ours, but we're gonna give you 100 years to figure it out, develop new technology, create reservoirs for more surface water. So it's a temporary solution, and the way they designed it was, or intended to set it up, was to make it last 100 years. So there's limitations on how much each water provider can pull out of the ground to ideally make it last 100 years, but it could be more, it could be less.
I assume they have, but the next question would be, what's the threat of sinkholes then when we extinguish an aquifer?
That's a really good question.
Back to the depth, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know, but that's Carrie's on it. Yeah.
You may already know this, but in 2002, during that drought, the Rocky Mountain News reported that homes in the Chatfield Estates area were losing their water because their wells ran into the Denver aquifer. And because the aquifer is saucer shaped, they were at the high end of the saucer.
Yeah.
And they were having to buy water. Trucks that carried 500 gallons would have to bring water to those homes in Chatfield Estates.
Yeah. That, I didn't know that, but that's interesting and I believe it because I think that's always a concern from some of our water resources manager is the way these are is, you know, how much is somebody else next door pumping and is that potentially taken away from our rights? Go ahead.
Where are we in the 100-year plan?
Yeah.
So in 1960, so we're, is that 70? We're 70 years into it, 60 years into it. And it's leaning towards less than 100 years. Yeah.
20 years. Are there any programs to recharge our aquifers?
Good question.
Yes, I'm gonna talk about that and might be the next slide. Thank you.
Why is the
I actually don't know that. It might be like a water quality issue. Yeah.
You said no one can touch the Dawson Aquifer. Can you say more about that?
Oh, that's just that question right there. People might be able to, I just know we don't have wells in it and the language that I read is deemed non-usable. So it might be a water quality concern. So yeah, I apologize. Carrie will write that one. It's water quality. Okay, yeah.
You're going to talk about recharging.
Yeah.
My understanding is that surface water storage results in a loss of, through evaporation that is more than just insignificant. And that's subsurface storage, eliminates evaporation if there's any way that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just right on the next slide. It's called aquifer storage and recovery. So I'm going to speak to that in just a couple minutes. Does anybody, any more questions? Okay. So we currently have 38 active wells. We used to have around 50, but sometimes things go out of use or it's just not worth maintaining anymore. So we have 38 active ones. Like I said, with groundwater rights, there are limitations on how much you're allowed to pump out of the ground each year. So we have the right to pump out a little over 17,000 acre feet each year. That is enough to supply our entire community at this time. However, we do not want to do that. So historically, we have used 11% of what we're allowed to pump each year. And I have another slide in a bit that'll show you how drought impacts how much groundwater we pull. The other reason that we have to pull from groundwater, even if we had all of the surface, even if we had all of our reservoirs filled, is because we have limited capacity at our water treatment facility right now, our surface water treatment facility. So that's what that construction is. It's gonna take probably another 8 years. So right now our water treatment facility is shut down, and for about 4 months in the winter, we are operating completely on groundwater in order to make those repairs to the water treatment. So when I talk about capacity, our peak demand during the summer is 30 to 35 million gallons per day. That is because of outdoor irrigation, that it quadruples during the summertime. In the winter, the demand is about 7 million gallons per day. So our water treatment plant currently only has 25 million capacity to treat and send out into the distribution system each day. While everything is said and done, it'll be at 40 million gallons. So at that point, if we had our full reservoirs, we would be able to meet community demand entirely with surface water. The aquifer storage and recovery that we were just talking about. So this is a really cool technology where when we have excess water, we can pump it back down into those aquifers. And it is not checked against our groundwater rights. So we can pull out that 17,000 acre feet in addition, anything that we've pumped down in there as well. When we pull it out, we call it recovery. It is an expensive process. We have to treat the water before it goes down. We have to treat it when it comes back up, and it takes a lot of energy, which means money, to pull that water out of the ground. So we estimate costs 40% more to provide this community with groundwater as opposed to surface water. Oh, and that picture right there is what we have a lot of well sites, but we have about 15 around town that are our irrigated well sites. And those are landscaped. They look like this. There's some bluegrass. Some of them are completely bluegrass. Some of them are completely, junipers, trees, that sort of thing. We do have a conversion plan for these well sites. I manage them and oversee the landscaping for these. This past summer, we were actually able to convert 2 of them. We converted 6,000 square feet of Kentucky bluegrass in total, and we converted them to Tahoma 31 Bermuda grass, which, if you're not familiar, this is a low water turf grass that's on the market now, that's becoming really popular. It's supposed to decrease your water use by 50% or more. The one caveat sometimes people don't like is that it takes till like June, depending on if we have a cold rainy June like we did this past year, it's going to take till like mid to end of June for it to green up. But if we have a very warm spring, as soon as the soil warms, it's going to green up, and it looks fantastic during the hottest times of the summer. So as opposed to your Kentucky bluegrass, which over 85 degrees is going to go dormant and not look great, and it's not worth putting more water on just to keep it green.
What is the name of that again?
It's called Tahoma 31. There's also another Bermuda grass called dogtuff grass, and that's been around for, I think, a dozen years, if not more, and that's put out by Plant Select.
Are either of those invasive, and what's the ecological consequence to our pollinators?
They're not invasive. And then I know the dogtuff does do a little flowering, so that does provide some support to our pollinators. The reason that we have a rebate program for turf replacement, and the Tahoma 31 and the Dog Tuff do qualify. We don't rebate them per square foot as high as Coloradoscape or Xeriscape that you might know, because of those reasons. But a lot of folks in our community are accustomed to Kentucky bluegrass. They like the way it looks, and so sometimes you have to meet people halfway.
Addressing that last issue, are there any legislative efforts to give tax incentives, since we live in an arid climate, we're having an expansive urban growth, for zero paving, those alternative grasses you were mentioning, synthetic turf? Are there any incentives for new developers to go that route because of climate change, and that reality?
So there are conservation tap fees. So if you put in like less Kentucky bluegrass, or you agree to meet a certain level of water efficiency, you can get a discounted tap fee if you're a new developer. The other thing is that there is Bill 6 that's gonna be in our Congress. They're gonna go into session and talk about this bill, and it is a turf ban on any what we call non-functional turf. So turf you are not using to recreate, or is very steeply sloped, is difficult to irrigate. So to ban that on all new development and any new government locations, anything like that. So that's in session. We don't know what the result is gonna be. And then in terms of funding, this isn't for new development, but the turf replacement program that I was talking about, House Bill 1151 was passed in 22, and that not very much money. So that delegated $1.5 million to help support either increasing the capacity of existing turf replacement programs, or help communities start new turf replacement programs. So we did apply and receive funding from both rounds for that. We got $44,000 from the state, or we will when they reimburse us. And so that went to expand our turf replacement project. And we have exhausted all of that funding in addition to what we had a part of our own program for this past year. Our community is really excited and enthusiastic about turf replacement.
So what about if your HOA requires Kentucky bluegrass? Is the legislature moving to change that?
There are already a couple bills about that. I know one was passed this year. They can't require you to take out any low water plant materials, and they can't impose a limitation on either how much or how little turf grass you're allowed to put in. And I know the Highlands Ranch Community Association, they no longer can require you to keep a certain amount of Kentucky bluegrass on your property. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the last thing I was just gonna say about these conversion programs is we did 2 of them. And the other reason we're doing these is we're already efficient with our water use on these on these well sites, but we really want them to be demonstration areas for the community, because they look very similar to like a miniature park or what a front yard might look like. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is how our use of groundwater is impacted by drought years. So 2002, terrible year for water. So the groundwater is the blue bar, and the purple is the surface. And the yellow here is recovery. That's water that we pump down into the aquifer that we then took back out. And you can see our highest use of groundwater was 2002, 41% of our demand was met with groundwater. So remember, our historic average is 15% groundwater each year. 2013 and 2022, we had to use almost double what our historic average is to meet our supply with groundwater. And again, a lot of this is being utilized to meet outdoor irrigation. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Just time check for you. It's 11:16, and I want to give our Zoomers a chance to ask a question while we don't make them feel like they're intruding. Anybody on Zoom have a question?
Yes, I have a question.
Ed Grant.
Okay. what can you do when you have an existing Kentucky bluegrass lawn so that you don't have to water 3 times a week to get it over to a red fescue or whatever other lower using a lower using water need plant? What do you do? Do you have to just strip it up? Do you kill it and then till it, or how can you get that changed? Because the fescue will remain green even if you only water it like once a week.
Yeah, so it depends on the route you want to go with, how you're gonna put that new plant material down. If you want to put down like a Tahoma 31, which is a sod, yes, you're gonna have to kill it, or not even kill it, but just you get a sod cutter and cut that all out. If you want to do some sort of native, and if this is a lawn, there's actually some cultivars of buffalo grass out there that look really great now. You maintain them to a higher level than you might normally maintain buffalo grass if you were just gonna let it go and water it like 4 inches a year. But there are some buffalo grass species out there. Sundancer is one of them. I think I have pictures of it in just a slide or two. Excuse me, that looks great. And something you can do in that respect is you can do a one-time non-selective spray of the lawn, and then you can seed into it, and that turf, sorry, that turf serves as like a blanket and some security and weed suppression as the buffalo grass grows up through it. And that's the best way to do it for any kind of native grass area that you want to
So
do.
what is going to be the estimated cost to replace the Kentucky blue to a lower using grass?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an exact number for you that would qualify for any water provider's turf replacement rebate. If you do it by seed, it's relatively cheap, and it obviously also differs as well if you bring in like a landscaping company. I know for like Tahoma 31 switch over of like 800 square feet is $3,000. It's definitely going to be less than that, especially if you do it by yourself. It's more the establishment of a native or more low water turf grass is really about your commitment to weed removal. That's the hardest part.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, we got one other question on Zoom. Rogers, go ahead. You got your hand up? Anybody still there? That's okay. Come back in later.
Thank you. All right. I didn't realize what time it is, so I'll get through these next handful of slides a little quicker. Next slide, please. So overall, we are happy with where our community's water use is at. What this graph is showing, the blue bars are our annual residential use. So this doesn't include commercial users. We have a separate graph for that. If you're interested, I can send it to you. This orange line here that's going up is the number on taps. So our community was growing very quickly in the late 90s, early 2000s. We now kind of have plateaued out with our homes going in. But you can see despite our taps increasing, we have reduced our water use. Excuse me. And we've kind of plateaued in the last 10 years, which is why we're really ramping up our conservation incentives for folks in the community. We've done a lot of provider and conservation that includes our water budget rate structure. So that's why we're looking to provider end. So now that's why we're now looking for more user end conservation. But we implemented our water budget rate structure here in 2003. Sorry, I'm standing in your way over here. But you can see a significant drop down when we put in that water budget rate structure, which does have those raising tiers if you go out of your budget to encourage conservation. And so we saw an immediate 20% drop in our community's water use when we implemented that. Next slide, please. You've heard me say this a couple times already, but our outdoor water use is pretty high. And this isn't just Highlands Ranch. This is the average single family home in the metro area. But 50% of the water used by a single family home each year is going out on the landscape. Next slide, please. So we already touched on this, but yeah, a natural solution to water security is to start transitioning our landscapes over. That's 2.3 billion gallons of water that's going on the landscape. We want resilient landscapes with regionally adapted plants. You can go full native if you want, but there's nothing wrong with using regionally adapted plants. They don't support our pollinators as much, but they still do. They add variety to our landscapes. They make them more versatile. This is a picture of a residential backyard in Colorado Springs. I had the pleasure of going down there and attending a native grass conference, and we saw some presentations, and the second half of the day was looking at residential homes and what people have done there to convert their property. So it's pretty cool. I know with regard to our front yards, we are limited here in Highlands Ranch. Probably can't, I don't think HOCA currently allows buffalo grass in your front yard, but there's still some other options there. And then, yeah, you already know this, but in addition to reducing water use, we support our pollinators. We live more sustainably. We reduce heat island effect. We reduce pesticides, fertilizers, maintenance fuels with Coloradoscape and native grass landscapes. You are not fertilizing 4 times a year. You're not mowing your grass every week. You're not running a line trimmer or an edger. You're not using a backpack blower. It cuts down on a lot of fuel. These are some of the, so this is blue grama grass, is our state grass. This is somebody's yard down in Colorado Springs. The leftover here is the side yard, and they've kind of just let it go and seed. I think it looks beautiful. And then this is their front yard. They just chop this down with a line trimmer like a couple times a year. And you can see it looks relatively similar to a Kentucky bluegrass lawn, and you're watering it significantly less. You can see the guide here from the folks down in Colorado Springs who are absolute experts on native grasses. You can mow it twice a year, and then once it's established, 3 to 4 inches of water a year. Next slide, please. This is that Sundancer buffalo grass I was talking about. This is this person's front yard. I stepped on it, I touched it. It's pretty soft, it's pretty nice. Again, you're just maintaining it to a higher level than you would normally maintain a native grass. So maybe you're watering this once a week or once every 2 weeks. You're still significantly watering less than Kentucky bluegrass though. And this is a side-by-side comparison on a property over here of Kentucky bluegrass to blue grama grass. All right, so this is our future outlook, some things that we want to achieve going forward. I did update our water efficiency plan this past year. So this is an internal document that we're required to make publicly available and redo every 7 years. It's required federally, and then Colorado the state of Colorado is the entity that requires us to update it every 7 years. We have to show the state, what have we done? What are we currently doing? What's working? What's not? What are our water use trends? So that's all in that document. The biggest takeaway from this document is I would like to reduce our community's demand by 800 acre feet. So what that means is right now you're demanding around 15,000 acre feet of water from us per year. I would like that to come down by 800 acre feet because you are being more thoughtful about your water use and you've taken advantage of some of our water efficiency rebates, that sort of thing. We want to be much more present in the community, do a lot more talks like this. Carrie and I are going to try to do 4 water related presentations around the community this year. And the hardest part is behavioral change, getting us to kind of break those habits of set it and forget it with your controller or mow every week, that sort of thing. Or even just talk, if you have somebody who takes care of your property, talk to them and get engaged. What are they doing to maintain your property? And does that align with your values? We have an AMI transition. Can I just touch on that one real quick? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
4 minutes. Okay. We have an AMI transition program in progress. So AMI, this is advanced metering infrastructure. So these are the smart water meters. You may or may not have one of these. So they take your readings of your water consumption through a cellular network, and it comes to an app or a computer screen. We did transition all of our irrigation only, which would be parks and parkways, HOA, common areas, business parks, a strip of turf grass you see. All of those were transferred over to AMI in 2021. It's a much smaller number of meters, so we were able to take care of that. And it helps me keep on top of, catching these leaks early. And then once we have those meters in place for a few years, we can use that as a way to track water use patterns easier. Right now, we track our water use patterns through billing data, and it's very tedious. There's a lot of Excel spreadsheets. But this would make our lives a lot easier. And it would make your life easier too, because you would be able to have, it's called the Eye on Water app. If you sign up for that app after you get one of these meters, you can track your own water use. You can be alerted to leaks. You can do all sorts of bar graphs and overlay the precipitation and the temperature and see how much you're using during different weather times. So they're pretty cool. We've got about 12% of the single family homes in the community transitioned over to these meters. It's going to take a long time. It's probably going to take another 10 years to get everyone transitioned over. If we wanted to do it tomorrow, it would cost about $15 million. And we do need to focus a lot of our efforts on our treatment plants right now. Those are the first priority. And then we're just going to continue, as always, to partner with HRCA and the Metro District. So we were able, with that state funding, we were able to help pick up the tab for a couple parkways projects this year. And then we also are helping to support HRCA do a landscape conversion project at the Westridge Rec Center. If you're not already aware, they hope next spring this spring to break ground on a landscape conversion project that's, when it's done, will probably take a few years, over 80,000 square feet. They're hoping to transfer the majority of that property over to low water and all sorts of things. So native, Tahoma 31, dog tough, Colorado-scape, reduce their water use, but really have it be a demonstration for the community, and all sorts of signs and labels and everything important that you need. Okay, I think I did it. I think that's it. And these are, thank you. I also just wanted to share, we had a ton this year, but these are 3 projects that I pulled from our residential turf replacement program. And they're all, well, this is a backyard. These 2 are front yards. So these are all approved. They do have to go through the HRCA improvements process. However, HRCA, if you're going to do Colorado-scape or Xeriscape, they have waived the $40 application fee for that permanently. So no application fee if that's the kind of conversion you're going to do. But yeah, we had 75 residents participate in the program this year. And in total, between residents and commercial, we gave away, I think, $120,000. So it's really exciting. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Paige. I just wanted to note that our church has embraced this water conservation. The trustees did an audit last spring and found out we're spending 2.5 million gallons every summer for our landscape. And if you look around, our landscape does have quite a bit of native grass on it. But those areas that do have turf, Paige came last summer and we walked around the grounds, and we are going to continue to improve there. We already put in some new irrigation equipment that saved us 200,000 gallons last summer. And we're going to keep moving in that direction. The Landscape and Facilities Committee of Earth Keepers will be working on that. If anybody's interested in joining them, we'd love to hear from you.
Is that drip irrigation on the trees?
I think it is drip irrigation, yeah. And then we have spray irrigation on some of the turf areas, and those places I think we're gonna pull. So will you be hanging around for last minute questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So they'll be here if you want to ask them more questions. And Steve, did you have a few things to say?
We're out of time today. Great, but stay and ask Paige questions if you'd like to. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for accommodating all that.
Can I just make one quick announcement? Those of you who have an interest in knowing more about
Cynthia.
Colorado,
Sorry, this is a message from our sponsor. If you have an interest in learning more about Colorado water, write this down. It's a website called watereducationcolorado.org. They're based here in Denver. They have quarterly magazines, topical like this. They have a whole series of what they call citizens guides. Yeah, this one happens to be about water rights. If you cannot sleep, this is the one to read. But they also have them about where our water comes from, understanding groundwater. Highly recommend, you can read these for free on the website. They'd of course like you to donate, and they have a regular publication called Freshwater News. And it has both original articles that their staff writes and summaries, kind of a concentrator, like a Huffington Post of water. And I highly recommend these, and I gave Vera Knowles a whole set of these, and I couldn't find them. So I'll have to find out where they are supposed to be in the library. Highly, highly, highly recommended. It's watereducationcolorado.org. So, and stay tuned for more water-related events coming up.